I still recall the whispers that followed me through the stone corridors of Norvane Abbey. The foundling, they called me, though never to my face. 20 summers had I seen when the truth came to light, a truth that would shatter the very foundations of my faith and identity. 'Twas on a night much like this one that I first drew breath within these hallowed walls, not as a postulant seeking God's embrace, but as a mewling babe abandoned at the convent door. The sisters found me wrapped in linen finer than any peasant could afford, with naught but a silver crucifix to hint at my origin. They named me Thomas, after the doubting apostle, perhaps a prophecy of the questions that would one day consume me. The Abbey of Norvane stands betwixt two worlds, the secular realm of nobility and the sacred domain of prayer. Here, monks and nuns serve in adjacent houses, separated by high stone walls and strict decree, yet united in devotion to the Almighty, or so I had always been. From my earliest memories, Abbot Cuthbert had shown me particular favor. While other orphans were sent to work the fields or apprenticed to craftsmen in the village, I was taught to read and write, to speak the Latin tongue, and to understand the Holy Scriptures. A boy of keen mind deserves cultivation, the abbot would say when others questioned my privilege. I grew under his watchful eye, becoming first an acolyte, then a novice, and finally taking my vows as a brother of the order. Through all these years, never did I question why the stern abbot, who rarely smiled at others, would soften his gaze when it fell upon me, until the fever came. The sickness swept through our abbey like God's own scourge. Many brothers fell ill, including Abbot Cuthbert. 'Twas my duty to tend to him, to bathe his burning brow and pray for his recovery, and 'twas in the grip of that fever that his secrets began to spill forth like water from a broken vessel. "Forgive me, Eleanor," he muttered. "The child, our child, I could not leave him to stranger." I know not how long I stood frozen beside his bed, the damp cloth forgotten in my trembling hand. Eleanor, I had heard that name whispered among the eldest nuns. Sister Eleanor, who had vanished from the convent 20 summers past, sent away in disgrace to a distant nunnery, or so the story went. 20 summers passed, when I was found at the convent door. Thus begins my tale, a tale of forbidden love, of betrayal and sacrifice, of secrets kept hidden beneath the weight of sacred vows. This is how I discovered that the man who had guided my steps toward heaven had first strayed far from that path himself, and how that discovery would forever alter the course of my life within these stone walls that had been my only home. The hours of prayer marked our days at Norvane, as regular as the turning of the earth, matins before dawn, prime as the sun rose, then terce, sex, nun, vespers, and compline as darkness fell. Between these sacred hours we worked in dutiful silence, copying manuscripts, tending the garden, brewing remedies in the herbarium. Such was my life, predictable, ordained, until that feverish night when Abbot Cuthbert's words planted a seed of doubt that grew like a thorny vine around my heart. As the abbot recovered his strength, I watched him with new eyes. The shape of his brow, the set of his shoulders, did they mirror my own? The thought both terrified and fascinated. Each time our paths crossed in the cloister, I searched his face for confirmation of what I had begun to suspect. Yet he gave no sign that he remembered his fever-dream confessions. "Brother Thomas," he called to me one autumn morning after Mass, "pray join me in my chamber. I would discuss thy progress in the scriptoria." I followed him to his sparsely furnished room, my heart thundering like the drums of war. Would he speak of it now? Had he noticed my gaze lingering upon him these past weeks? "Thy hand grows steady with the quill," he said, examining a manuscript I had recently completed. "The Benedictine house at Thornfield has requested our finest scribe for a commission of great importance." "You would send me to Thornfield, Father Abbot?" I asked, my voice betraying more emotion than was seemly. "Unless thou wouldst prefer to remain at Norvane." His eyes met mine, and for a moment I thought I glimpsed something beyond the usual solemnity, a flicker of what might have been tenderness. My mouth grew dry as dust. "I have questions that press upon my spirit, Father, questions that disturb my prayers and haunt my sleep." His face changed then, a shadow passing over it like a cloud before the sun. "What troubles thee, my son?" The word son struck me like a physical blow. "During thy fever thou spoke of a woman named Eleanor and a child." Silence fell between us, heavy as a tomb, broken only by the distant chanting of the brothers in the chapel. I watched as the blood drained from his face, leaving it ashen and drawn. "Thou heard my ravings," he whispered at last. His hands, always so steady when offering the host, now trembled as they gripped the edge of his writing desk. "Was it mere ravings, Father? Or was there truth in thy words?" He turned from me then, moving to the narrow window that overlooked the cloister garden. For a long moment he gazed out upon the herbs and flowers, carefully tended in neat rows, order imposed upon nature's chaos, just as our monastic rules sought to tame the wilderness of men's souls. I have prayed each day for 20 years that this moment would never come, he said, his voice so low I had to strain to hear it. Yet I knew in my heart that God would not grant such a selfish prayer. My breath caught in my throat. Then it is true? I am not here, he interrupted, turning back to me with newfound urgency. Not within these walls where even the stones have ears. Meet me tonight after Convent at the old oak beyond the eastern wall. Come alone and speak of this to no one. I nodded, unable to form words as my mind reeled with implication. The abbot, my father, and who then was Eleanor, my mother, a nun who had broken her vows? The questions multiplied like loaves before the multitude. That day passed in a fog. I moved through the abbey's routines, chanting psalms, copying texts, taking my meager meal in the refectory, yet I was present in body only. My spirit hovered elsewhere, caught between the past I had never known, and a future suddenly uncertain. Brother Anselm, who shared my duties in the scriptoria, noticed my distraction. Thy quill has been poised above that parchment for nigh on a quarter hour, he observed. Art thou composing a new gospel? I forced a smile. My thoughts wander to, forgive me, brother. 'Tis the invitation to Thornfield that occupies thy mind, he said, dipping his own quill in the inkwell. A great honor that, though I confess I shall miss thy company if thou goest. How simple his world seemed to me then, a world where the greatest concern was the temporary absence of a friend. How I envied him his uncomplicated heart. The bells tolled for vespers, then Compline, each chime bringing me closer to the meeting that might forever change my understanding of who I was. When the final prayers had been said, and the brothers retired to their cells, I slipped from my pallet and made my way through the darkened corridor. The night was cool, the sky clear and scattered with stars like diamonds on a jeweler's. I found the eastern gate unbarred, had he arranged this too, and passed through it, my sandaled feet silent on the dew-dampened grass. The ancient oak stood like a sentinel at the edge of the abbey land, its massive trunk and spreading branches black against the indigo sky. As I approached, a shadow detached itself from the deeper darkness beneath the tree. Thomas. The abbot's voice sounded different here outside the abbey walls. Less sure, perhaps. More human. Father Abbot, I replied, then hesitated, the title suddenly layered with new meaning. Or should I call thee something else now? He sighed, a sound full of years and sorrow. Cuthbert will suffice. Here, beneath God's sky, we are but two souls seeking truth. Then tell me true, Cuthbert, am I thy son? Thou art. Two simple words. Yet they crashed upon me like a tempest. And Eleanor? She is, thy mother, Sister Eleanor of this very abbey. I sank down upon a gnarled root of my legs suddenly unable to support me. A nun? Thou broke thy vows with a bride of Christ? We both broke our vows, he corrected gently. I was younger then, newly appointed as abbot, full of pride in my position. Eleanor was equally young, equally foolish. She came to the convent not by choice, but by her family's decree. Her heart was never truly given to God, and so she gave it to thee instead. My voice sounded harsh even to my own ears. We found in each other what we had not found in prayer. It was wrong, a grave sin, but from that sin came thee, Thomas, and in thee I have seen only goodness. What happened to her? The sisters say she was sent away. Cuthbert lowered himself to sit beside, his joints cracking. When her condition became impossible to hide, the mother abbess discovered our transgression. There was talk of public disgrace, of reporting our sins to the bishop, but Mother Agnes was a merciful woman. She arranged for Eleanor to be sent to a remote priory in the north to bear the child in secret, and then to leave me, at the convent door. I finished bitterly. No, he said sharply, that was never the plan. Eleanor intended to renounce her vows and raise thee in a village far from here. She had a cousin in Northumbria who would have taken her. A cold feeling crept over me. What happened? Cuthbert's face was a mask of ancient grief in the starlight. Childbirth. The labor was long and difficult. By the time I received word and traveled to her side, she was already beyond the reach of earthly medicine. My mother, a woman I had never known, had died bringing me into this world. The knowledge sat like a stone in my chest. Her last words were of, he continued softly, she made me promise to keep thee safe, to ensure thou grew up loved. I brought thee back to Norvain, claiming to have found thee abandoned. Mother Agnes knew the truth, but she allowed the deception. All these years, I whispered, all these years I have been here, within these walls, never knowing. What would knowing have changed? He asked. I could not claim thee openly as my son. Such a revelation would have destroyed us both. It would have given me truth. I stood up, suddenly angry. Instead of a life built upon lies. Not lies, he protested. I have taught thee to seek God, to value learning, to be a good man. These things are true, regardless of who thy father might. And yet thou kept the most important truth from me. Why tell me now? Why not carry thy secret to the grave? He was silent for, because I am dying, Thomas. The anger drained from me, replaced by a cold shock. Dying? The fever? The fever merely weakened what was already failing. There is a growth within me, eating away at my vitals. The herbalist gives me till winter's end, no more. I stared at him, this man who had been my mentor, my spiritual father, and unknown to me, my sire in blood as well. Only now did I notice how gaunt his face had become, how the flesh seemed to hang upon his bones like a garment too large for its wearer. I could not leave this world without telling thee the truth, he said. Thou deserve to hear it from lips, not discover it after I am gone. And what am I to do with this truth? I asked, my voice breaking. How am I to continue here, chanting prayers beside brothers who would revile me if they knew my origin? That choice lies with thee. He reached into his robe and withdrew a small leather pouch. This was thy mother's. Her family was of noble blood, with lands in the south. The ring inside bears their seal. If thou wishest to leave Norvain, to seek a different life, this will give thee claim to her inheritance. I took the pouch, feeling its weight, the weight of a different future than the one I had imagined for myself. And if I choose to stay, then none need ever know what passed between us this night. He rose to his feet with effort. Think on it, Thomas. Pray for guidance. Whatever thou choosest, know that I am proud of the man thou hast become. He turned to go, but I caught his sleeve. Wait. I would know more of her. Of Eleanor. What was she like? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. She had thy eyes, and thy stubborn spirit. She loved music and could sing like an angel, which is perhaps why they made her choir mistress despite her youth. She laughed easily and saw beauty where others saw only mundane things. Did she? I hesitated, uncertain whether I truly wanted the answer. Did she love me? Even knowing that I would be the instrument of her disgrace? Oh, Thomas, his voice softened. From the moment she knew of thy existence, she loved thee beyond reason. 'Tis why she planned to forsake her vows, not for me, but for thee, to give thee a life, a name. We stood in silence then, father and son beneath the ancient, the weight of 2 decades of secrets hanging between us like an invisible veil. We should return, he said finally. Dawn comes early, and questions will be asked if we are both absent from matins. I nodded, but as we walked back toward the abbey gate, a question formed in my mind, one that had been lurking beneath all others. Does God forgive such sins? I asked. The breaking of sacred vows? Cuthbert stopped, his face solemn in the moonlight. I have asked myself that question every day for 20 years. I have no answer save this. God gave us his only son that we might be forgiven. If he could make such a sacrifice, then perhaps his mercy extends even to sinners like me. It was not the certainty I sought, but it was honest. As we passed back through the gate and into the world of stone and prayer, I felt as though I were entering a familiar room where all the furniture had been rearranged. Recognizable, yet strangely old. That night, sleep eluded me. I lay on my hard pallet, turning Cuthbert's words over in my mind, feeling the weight of Eleanor's ring in my palm. Who was I now? Brother Thomas, dedicated to God's service, or the nameless son of a forbidden union, born of broken vows and hidden passion? And what of the invitation to Thornfield? Was it truly an honor bestowed upon a skilled scribe? Or was it Cuthbert's attempt to send me away before his illness revealed all our secret? As the first light of dawn crept through the narrow window of my cell, I made my decision. I would go to Thornfield, not to flee the truth, but to seek space to understand it, to pray for clarity far from the abbey where every stone now seemed to whisper of deception. The following day, I informed Abbot Cuthbert of my choice. He nodded, his face betraying nothing to any who might observe us. Thou wilt depart in 3 days' time, he said formally. May thy work there bring glory to God and honor to Norvain. Those 3 days passed in a blur of preparations and hushed farewells. Brother Anselm pressed upon me a pot of his finest ink. For when inspiration strikes, he whispered with a smile. The herbalist, Brother Matthias, gave me a small sachet of dried lavender, to help thee sleep in a strange bed. Only the eldest of the brothers, Adalbert, looked at me with knowing eyes. He blessed my... We are all God's children first, he said cryptically, his gnarled hand resting briefly on my shoulder. Had he guessed? Or was he simply offering the comfort of faith to a nervous traveler? On the morning of my departure, as I secured my few belongings to the mule that would carry me to Thornfield, Abbot Cuthbert approached for a final blessing. As he made the sign of the cross over me, he pressed something into my hand, a small scroll of parchment, tightly bound. For thy journey, he said, loud enough for others to hear. Then, lower, read it only when thou art alone. I tucked it inside my robe without comment and mounted the mule. As I rode through the abbey gates, I did not look back. I could not bear to see Norvain, the only home I had ever known, shrinking behind me. The journey to Thornfield would take 3 days, following the river road through forest and field. My first night, I slept beneath the stars at a wayside shrine dedicated to Saint Christopher, patron of travelers. It was there, by the light of a small fire, that I unrolled the parchment Cuthbert had given me. The writing was not his practiced script, but a hand I had never seen before, more delicate, with flowing curves like the tendrils of a vine. It began without greeting. My child, my heart, my dearest sin, if you are reading these words, then you have survived your entry into this harsh world, and for that alone, I thank God hourly. I write this from my bed in the priory of St. Agnes, where kind sisters tend me though they know my shame. The pain comes in waves, like the tide against the shore. Between these waves I set down these words, that you might someday know the truth of your beginning. I was born Eleanor of House Blackthorn, second daughter to a lord with more ambition than compassion. When I was 15 summers, my father discovered me in the arms of a stable boy. The boy was whipped and sent away. I was sent to Norvain Abbey the very next day. My dowry paid to God instead of a husband. I took my vows with lips that spoke piety, but a heart full of resentment. For 2 years, I performed my duties without faith or joy, until Cuthbert came to the abbey as its new abbot. He was young for such a position, not yet 30, and his eyes held understanding when he heard my confession. He did not condemn my doubts, but encouraged me to seek God in my... Our love was a gradual thing, born of shared confidences and stolen moments in the abbey garden. When he first kissed me among the herb beds, I thought surely lightning would strike us both. It did not. The sky remained clear, the birds continued to sing, and the sin, once committed, seemed easier to repeat. When I discovered I carried you within me, terror and joy waged war in my breast. Cuthbert spoke of distant monasteries where we might flee, of renouncing our vows and seeking a life together. But I knew the church would never permit a fallen abbot and nun to live in peace. We would be excommunicated, perhaps worse. So I agreed to Mother Agnes's plan, to be sent away to bear you in secret. Afterward, I intended to find my mother's cousin in Northumbria. She had married a merchant and would shelter us, I was certain. Cuthbert would remain at Norvain, his reputation intact. We would never see each other again, but you would have a chance at a respectable life. God, it seemed, had other plans for me. The midwife says I am bleeding too heavily, that the birthing fever has taken hold. I can feel my strength ebbing like water through open fingers. I have seen your face, so perfect, so innocent of the circumstances of your conception. I have named you Thomas for the apostle who needed to see to believe. Perhaps you too will need proof of the love that created you. If you are raised at Norvain, as Cuthbert has sworn to me you will, then know this. Every stone of that place holds a piece of my heart. When you walk its corridors, I walk beside you in spirit. When you chant the hours, my voice joins yours from beyond the veil. And know this as well, my beloved child. I regret my broken vows to God, but I cannot regret the love that brought you into being. Some would call you the fruit of sin, but to me, you are proof that even in our errors, beauty may be found. With all the love a mother's heart can hold, Eleanor. The parchment blurred before my eyes as tears fell freely down my cheeks. Here at last was her voice, the mother I had never known, speaking to me across the chasm of years. Her words painted a different picture than Cuthbert's careful account. Not a moment of weakness, but a love, nurtured over time. Not mere broken vows, but two souls seeking connection in a world that had given them few choices. I read the letter thrice more before carefully rolling it again, and securing it in the leather pouch with Eleanor's ring. Then I lay back on my rough blanket, gazing up at the vault of stars, and for the first time since discovering my true parentage, I prayed with an open heart. God of mercy, I whispered, if thou canst hear the prayers of one such as I, born of broken vows but raised in thy service, grant me understanding. Show me the path I am meant to walk. No divine voice answered from, no burning bush illuminated my way, but as I drifted towards sleep, a sense of peace settled over, the first I had felt since that fateful night at Cuthbert's sickbed. The next 2 days of travel passed without incident. The countryside grew wilder as I journeyed north, the cultivated fields giving way to rolling moorland where sheep grazed on the sparse grasses. Thornfield Abbey rose before me on the afternoon of the 3rd day, its grey towers stark against the leaden sky. Unlike Norvain's graceful arches and abundant gardens, Thornfield was a fortress of faith, stern, unyielding, built to withstand both physical sieges and spiritual doubts. Its walls were twice the height of a man, its windows narrow as archers' slits. The great oak doors stood open, but the darkness beyond seemed to swallow the daylight. Brother Thomas of Norvain, I announced myself to the porter, a wizened man whose tonsure had grown ragged with white stubble. He nodded without smile. Thou art expected. Brother Librarian will meet thee in the chapter house. Follow the cloister to thy right. The air inside Thornfield's walls felt different, colder, certainly, but also weighted with an austerity that made Norvain seem indulgent by comparison. The stones of the cloister gleamed wetly, as though recently scrubbed, and no sound disturbed the silence save the echo of my own footsteps. The chapter house was a circular chamber with a domed ceiling. Wooden benches lined the walls, and in the center stood a massive lectern bearing an open manuscript. A lone figure bent over it, a candle guttering beside him despite the daylight still filtering through the high window. "Brother Thomas?" The figure straightened, revealing a man of middle years with a scholar's stoop and ink-stained fingers. "I am Brother Boniface, keeper of Thornfield's library. Thy reputation precedes thee." "I hope it speaks well of me," I replied with a slight bow. "Indeed, the Abbot of Norvain writes that thy hand is steady, and thy eye for detail unmatched." He gestured to the manuscript. "This is the work for which we requested assistance, a Gospel of Matthew, to be illuminated in the finest style for the bishop's personal chapel. The text is complete, but the illuminations have barely begun. Our previous artist was called to God's side before he could finish." I approached the lectern and examined the pages. The script was impeccable, each letter a testament to patient devotion. The few completed illuminations blazed with color and gold leaf, scenes from Christ's life rendered with a skill that made my own abilities seem childish in comparison. "I am not certain I can match such artistry," I admit. Brother Boniface nodded approvingly. "Humility is the beginning of wisdom, but Abbot Cuthbert would not have recommended thee if he doubted thy skills. Thou wilt have 3 months to complete the work. Thy cell has been prepared in the eastern dormitory. Thou wilt take thy meals with us and observe all the offices of—" "And when the work is finished?" I asked, suddenly aware of how little thought I had given to what would come after. "That is between thee and thy abbot," he replied, his gaze curious but not unkind. "Now come, Vespers approaches, and it would not do to begin thy stay by missing the divine office." The days at Thornfield fell into a rhythm different, yet familiar. The hours of prayer provided the framework, as they had at Norvain, but between them, I spent my time hunched over the gospel manuscript. My world narrowed to the width of a quill's point. The work absorbed me completely. Each illumination required days of preparation, sketching the design, grinding pigments, applying the gossamer thin sheets of gold leaf that would catch the light and transform mere paint into divine radiance. As my brush traced the lines of Christ's face, the folds of his garments, the expressions of his disciples, I found myself wondering if this was a form of prayer in itself, an offering of skill instead of words. The brothers of Thornfield kept their distance, respecting both my concentration and my status as a visitor. Only Brother Boniface sought my company regularly, eager to discuss the technical aspects of the manuscript. His own expertise lay in text rather than image. He could recite entire books of scripture from memory and spot a misplaced comma at 20 paces, but he appreciated the artistry of illumination with a scholar's precision. "Thy use of ultramarine here," he remarked one afternoon, pointing to the Virgin's robe in a nativity scene. "It draws the eye without overwhelming the composition. Most impressive." "The color comes at great cost," I replied. "I use it sparingly, as we all must with our God-given talents," he mused. "Tell me, Brother Thomas, how came thee to such skill? Was there a master at Norvain who taught thee?" I hesitated, uncertain how much to reveal. "I was fortunate in my instruction," I said carefully. "The abbot himself took interest in my education from—" "Ah, Cuthbert." Boniface's expression softened slightly. "I knew him when we were both novices at Canterbury. He always had an eye for potential in unlikely places." My hand stilled above the parchment. "Thou knew him well?" "As well as any might know Cuthbert," he said with a small laugh. "He kept his own counsel even then, but he was kind to me when others mocked my stammer, a childhood affliction long since overcome." He tilted his head, studying me with new interest. "Thou bears some resemblance to him, I think, around the eyes, perhaps." My heart skipped a beat. Had he guessed? Was my parentage written so plainly on my face that any who had known Cuthbert in his youth might see it? "I would not know," I said, returning my attention to the manuscript with forced casualness. "I came to Norvain as an infant. I never knew my parents." "Forgive me," Boniface said quickly. "I meant no offense. Many of God's finest servants were orphans raised by the church. Did not Moses himself come to Pharaoh's daughter in a basket of reeds?" I managed a smile. I doubt my own arrival was quite so dramatic. Nonetheless, God clearly had a purpose for thee. He pointed to the illumination taking shape beneath my brush. "Few can transform mere pigment into such living." His words, meant as comfort, struck a deeper chord than he could know. If God had a purpose for me, a child born of broken vows, might that purpose extend beyond the walls of any abbey? The question followed me to my cell that night, and for many nights thereafter. As the weeks passed and winter settled over the moors with an iron grip, I found myself drawing closer to completion of the manuscript. The final illumination would be the most complex. Christ's ascension into heaven, surrounded by adoring angels. I sketched and re-sketched the scene, dissatisfied with every attempt. It lacks something, I complained to Brother Boniface one evening in the scriptoria. The angels seem wooden, the Christ too distant. Perhaps thou art too close to the work, he suggested. Step away for a day. The feast of St. Agnes approaches, and the village nearby holds a fair to market. I could arrange permission for thee to attend. The suggestion startled me. At Norvain we rarely ventured beyond the abbey walls, except on official business. Would the abbot permit such a diversion? Abbot Theobald is stern but not unreasonable. Thy work has progressed well ahead of schedule. A day's respite would not be amiss. And so it was that I found myself, for the first time in my memory, walking alone among ordinary folk, free of the distinctive habit that marked me as separate. Brother Boniface had lent me a simple tunic and cloak, arguing that my monastic garb might inhibit the villagers' revelry. The village of Thornfield was little more than a cluster of thatched cottages around a green, but on that day, it buzzed with activity. Stalls sold everything from fresh bread to crude wooden toys. A juggler performed near the well, tossing colored balls with remarkable dexterity. Children ran laughing between the legs of adults, their faces sticky with honey treats. I wandered among them, both fascinated and overwhelmed by the noise, the smells, the press of bodies. This was the world Eleanor had known before the convent walls closed around her, a world of simple pleasures and human connections, unmediated by bells and prayers. You look lost, friend. The voice belonged to a young woman selling spiced wine from a small cart. Her hair, the color of ripe wheat, escaped in tendrils from beneath her linen cap. New to these parts? I am visiting, I replied, oddly tongue-tied. I had spoken with nuns at Norvain. Of course, but always briefly, always with the proper deference and distance. This woman looked directly at me, her gaze frank and curious. From the abbey, wager. She smiled, revealing a dimple in her right cheek. You've the look about you, like you're not quite sure what to do with yourself without stone walls around you. I felt heat rise to my face. Is it so obvious? Only to those with eyes to see. She ladled wine into a wooden cup and offered it to me. Here, first cup's free for strangers. I'm Maria. Thomas, I said, accepting the wine with a nod of thanks. The spices, cinnamon, clove, something sharper I couldn't name, tickled my nose and warmed my throat when I sipped. Well met, Thomas. What brings a holy brother down from the hill on St. Agnes's Day? Not the dancing, I suspect. Dancing? She laughed, the sound bright as a bell. Surely even monks have heard of dancing. It begins at sunset. The whole village joins in. She studied my face. You've never danced, have you? I shook my head, somewhat embarrassed by my ignorance of such a basic human activity. Well then, she glanced at the position of the sun, already low in the winter sky. My father will take over the wine cart soon. Perhaps I might show you, if you're not required back at your prayers. I should have refused. I should have finished my wine, thanked her politely, and returned to the abbey before vespers. Instead, I heard myself say, I would like that. We spoke as the sun sank toward the horizon, and the fair began to transform. Torches were lit around the green, creating pools of golden light in the gathering dusk. A group of men with simple instruments, a drum, a flute, a stringed thing Maria called a rebec, assembled near the village's lone stone building, an inn called the Lamb and Flag. Maria told me of her life in the village, her widowed father, the older brother who had gone to war in France and never returned, the younger sister recently married to the blacksmith's son. In turn, I shared carefully edited tales of abbey life, of the manuscript I was illuminating, of the differences between Thornfield and Norvain. And there's no Maria at Norvain to tempt you with spiced wine and promises of dancing? She teased as her father. A broad-shouldered man with the same wheat-colored hair arrived to relieve her. There is not, I answered truthfully. Then Norvain is the poorer for. She took my hand, her fingers warm and surprisingly strong. Come, Thomas. The music begins. What followed was unlike anything I had experienced in my cloistered life. The villagers formed circles around the green, holding hands and moving in patterns that seemed chaotic to my untrained eye, but clearly followed rules everyone but me understood. Maria guided me, laughing at my clumsiness, but never cruelly, teaching me the steps with patient repetition. You see, it's like your prayers, she said as I finally began to grasp a simple circle dance. One step follows another in its proper order. But this was nothing like, or at least, nothing like any prayer I had known. This was bodies in motion, breath coming quick, blood warming with exertion and something else I dared not name. This was Maria's hand in mine, her hair coming loose from its cap as she twirled, her laughter mingling with the music in the chill night air. For a few precious hours, I forgot Norvain. I forgot the manuscript waiting for completion. I forgot even Cuthbert and Eleanor and the tangled roots of my existence. I was simply Thomas, dancing on a winter's night with a girl whose smile outshone the torches. When the moon had risen high above the village, the music finally ceased. Villagers drifted toward home or into the welcoming warmth of. Maria walked with me to the edge of the village, where the path began its ascent toward the abbey. "Will you come again?" she asked, her breath visible in the cold air. "To the village, I mean. Before you return to Norvain." I hesitated. "I do not know if I will be permitted." She studied my face in the moonlight. "And if you were not a monk? If you were simply Thomas? Free to choose your path?" The question struck at the heart of the doubt that had been growing within me since discovering my true parentage. If I were not bound by vows taken before I understood their full meaning, who might I be? What life might I build? "I cannot answer that," I said softly. "I know no other life. Perhaps you should try to imagine one." She reached up, her fingers brushing my cheek with a touch light as a snowflake. Then she turned and walked back toward the lights of the village, leaving me to climb the hill alone. I returned to Thornfield with my thoughts in greater turmoil than when I had left. Brother Boniface raised an eyebrow at my late return but asked no questions. I made my way to my cell, still feeling the phantom pressure of Maria's hand in mine, the echo of music in my ears. That night, I dreamed of Eleanor, not as I imagined her from Cuthbert's descriptions, but as she appeared in the miniature portrait I had found inside the ring she left me. In the dream, she wore no nun's habit, but a simple gown of green. Her hair, my hair, Cuthbert had said, flowed freely down her back. "You found me," she said, her voice as clear as if she stood beside my pallet. "I never knew you," I replied, "but you know yourself now." She smiled, and I saw in that smile the same dimple that had charmed me on Maria's cheek. "That is what I wished for you, to know yourself truly, not as others would have you be." I woke before dawn, the dream still vivid in my. As I made my way to the chapel for matins, a strange clarity began to take shape when I returned to the scriptoria after breaking my fast. I looked with new eyes at the final illumination I had struggled to. The problem was not in the technique, in the vision. I had been painting Christ's ascension as I had been taught it should appear, remote, majestic, beyond human understanding. But the Christ I now saw in my mind's eye was not distant at all. He was a God who had lived as a man, who had known hunger and thirst, laughter and tears, who had danced at weddings and wept at funerals, who had loved. I set aside my previous sketches and began anew. This time, as I traced the outline of Christ's face, I gave him eyes that gazed not toward heaven, but back at the disciples he was leaving behind, eyes full of love and understanding for the very human struggles would face in his absence. The work flowed from my brush as never before. Hours passed unnoticed as I mixed colors, applied gold leaf, added detail upon detail. When Brother Boniface came to check my progress, he stood silent for a long moment. "This is not what I expected," he said finally. My hand paused. "Is it not acceptable?" "It is more than acceptable. It is," he searched for the word, "truthful. I have seen 100 depictions of the Ascension, but never one that captured both the divine and human aspects so perfectly." He bent closer, examining the face I had given to Christ. "He looks as though he understands exactly what it means to leave behind those he loves, even for a greater purpose." I had not consciously intended that meaning, but as Boniface spoke, I recognized the truth in his words. Had I been painting not only Christ's ascension, but also my own impending departure, from Norvain, from the only life I had known, from Cuthbert who would soon join Eleanor beyond the veil? "I shall finish it tomorrow," I promised. "The manuscript will be complete well before the bishop's expected arrival." "And then?" Boniface asked. "Will you return directly to Norvain?" I hesitated. "I am uncertain of my path." He nodded, as if he had expected this answer. "Brother Thomas, I hope thou wilt not think me presumptuous, but I have lived many years and observed many souls. Something troubles thine eye. If thou wouldst unburden thyself, know that I am bound by the seal of confession." For a moment, I considered telling him everything, about Cuthbert and Eleanor, about the letter, about the doubt that had taken root in my heart, but the words stuck in my throat. Not yet. I needed to finish this work, this last act of devotion, before I could face what might come after. "I thank thee for thy concern," I said. "Perhaps before I leave Thornfield, I will seek thy counsel." He accepted this with a nod and left me to my work. The next day, as promised, I completed the final illumination. The manuscript gleamed with color and gold, a testament to faith rendered in earthly materials. Brother Boniface arranged for it to be displayed in the chapter house, where the brothers might admire it before it was presented to the bishop. Their praise was generous, their admiration sincere, yet I felt strangely detached from their accolades, as if the Thomas who had created this work was already becoming someone else, someone I had yet to fully know. That evening, a messenger arrived from Norvain. He found me in the cloister, watching the early stars appear in the winter sky. "Brother Thomas?" He bowed slightly, extending a sealed parchment, from the infirmarian at Norvain Abbey. My fingers trembled as I broke the seal, though I already knew what message it must contain. The words, written in Brother Matthias's careful confirmed my fear. Brother Thomas, it is my solemn duty to inform thee that our beloved Abbot Cuthbert passed into God's embrace 2 days past. Following a brief worsening of his condition, he departed peacefully, having received the sacraments, and with thy name upon his lips. The Brotherhood will observe 30 days of prayer for his soul. If thou canst return for the installation of his successor, thy presence would be welcome. In Christ's mercy, Brother Matthias, Infirmarian of Norvain Abbey. I folded the parchment carefully and placed it within my robe, next to the pouch containing Eleanor's ring and letter. Cuthbert was gone. My father, both spiritual and by blood, had joined my mother in whatever realm lay beyond this one. I was truly orphaned, and yet, paradoxically, more free than I had ever been. That night, I did not sleep. Instead, I knelt on the cold stone floor of my cell, the crucifix on the wall my only witness, and prayed as I never had before. Not the formal prayers of the divine office, but words that poured from my heart, like water from a broken vessel. Lord, I whispered into the darkness, I was brought to thy service not by my own choice, but by circumstance. I have lived within thy house, chanted thy praises, illuminated thy word. Yet now I question whether the path I walk is truly the one thou hast chosen, or merely the one chosen for me by others. No divine voice answered, but as the first gray light of dawn crept through my window, a sense of peace settled over me, the peace that comes with decision rather than doubt. When Brother Boniface came to inquire about my plans following the news from Norvain, I met his gaze steadily. I have decided not to return immediately, I told him. There is something I must do first. A pilgrimage of sorts. He studied my face, his eyes shrewd but kind. The abbey has paid for thy work in advance. The funds await thee in the bursar's office. More than enough for whatever journey thou mightst undertake. I bowed my head, grateful for his discretion. I thank thee, brother, and I would ask one more favor if I may. Would thou hear my confession? Not here, but perhaps in the chapel, before God's altar. Of course, he seemed to understand that this was no ordinary confession. After terce, the chapel is usually empty then, and so it was that I knelt before the altar of Thornfield Abbey with Brother Boniface seated beside me, and unburdened my soul of the truth I had carried like a stone these past months, of Cuthbert and Eleanor, of my illegitimate birth, of the doubt that now plagued my vocation. I do not know if I was ever truly called to this life, I concluded, my voice barely above a whisper, or if I merely accepted it because I knew no other. Boniface was silent for a long moment after I finished speaking. When he finally responded, his voice held no judgment, only thoughtful consideration. Thomas, the vows we take as monks are sacred, this is true, but they are meant to be taken freely, with full understanding of what they entail. Thou wert raised within abbey walls, with no knowledge of any other life. Can such a choice truly be called free? I looked up, startled by his words. Art thou suggesting I should renounce my vows? I suggest nothing, he said carefully. I merely observe that God's plan for each soul is unique. Perhaps thy time at Norvain was preparation, not destination. The talents God gave thee, thy skill with brush and quill, these would serve thee well in the world beyond our walls. But to leave the order would be a serious step. Yes, not one to be taken in haste or in anger. He leaned forward. Tell me honestly, Tom, when thou pray, when thou participate in the offices, when thou chant the psalms, dost thou feel God's presence? Dost thou feel thy soul drawn upward in true devotion? I considered the question honestly. There are moments of transcendence, when the voices join in perfect harmony, or when the light strikes through the colored glass at a certain angle, but they are moments only. Between them, I hesitated. Between them, I often feel as though I am merely playing a role, speaking words written by others. Boniface nodded, unsurprised. And this manuscript thou hast just completed? The work of thy hands? That is different. When I illuminate a text, when I translate the word into image, I feel connected to something larger than myself. That, Thomas, may be thy true vocation. God speaks to us in many ways, not only through the rituals of the church. He rested a hand briefly on my shoulder. I cannot tell thee what path to choose, but I can absolve thee of the sin of doubt, for doubt itself is no sin, merely the soul's way of seeking deeper truth. He pronounced the words of absolution, and as I rose from my knees, I felt lighter than I had in months, perhaps years. Not because my decision was made, it was not fully, but because for the first time I felt permission to make it at all. What will thou do now? Boniface asked as we left the chapel. I thought to visit the village again. There is someone there I wish to speak with. His eyes crinkled with understanding. The girl from the fair? Maria, was it not? I stared at him, shocked that he knew. Come, Thomas, did thou think I sent thee to the village merely for thy diversion? I saw thy spirit struggling and thought perhaps a taste of the world beyond our walls might help thee discern thy true path. He smiled. I have been Thornfield's librarian for 30 years. I have watched many young brothers wrestle with their vocations. Some stay, some go. God loves them all the same. That afternoon, wearing once again the borrowed tunic and cloak, I made my way down to the village. I found Maria at her father's cottage, kneading dough for the next day's bread. She looked up as I approached, flour dusting her cheeks, surprise and pleasure lighting her eyes. Thomas, I did not expect to see thee again before thy departure. Nor did I expect to come, I admitted, but much has changed since we danced beneath the stars. Her father, sensing the private nature of our conversation, mumbled something about checking his traps and disappeared out the back door, leaving us alone in the small, warm kitchen. I told her everything, about Norvain, about Cuthbert and Eleanor, about the manuscript now completed, and the decision that lay before me. She listened without interruption, her hands stilling in the dough, her eyes never leaving my face. So thou art not bound by birth to the church, she said when I had finished. Thy vows were taken in ignorance of who thou truly were. The church would not see it that way, I cautioned. In their eyes, a vow is a vow, regardless of the circumstances surrounding it. And in thy eyes? She asked softly. I looked around her simple home, the hearth fire casting its warm glow, the herbs hanging from the rafters, the small wooden table where a family might gather. So different from the grand but cold spaces of Thornfield or Norvain. A life here would be one of labor and simplicity, but also of human connection, of the liberty to choose one's own path each day. In my eyes, I said slowly, I see a choice I never knew I had, a life I never imagined might be. And does that life include me, Thomas? Her directness took my breath away. For I would not have thee trade one form of obligation for another. If thou leaves the abbey, it should be for thyself first, not for any maid, no matter how fair she might think herself. I smiled at her practical wisdom. I cannot pretend thou art not part of what draws me to consider this path. But thou art right. This decision must be mine alone, made before God and my own conscience. She nodded, satisfied. Then take the time thou needs. I have waited 20 years for a man worth the having. I can wait a while longer to be sure of thy mind. I reached across the table and took her flour-dusted hand in. I shall return to Norvain first, to pay my respects to Cuthbert, and to speak with the brothers who have been my family. After that, I squeezed her fingers gently. After that, we shall see what path God illuminates for me. 2 weeks later, I stood once more before the gates of Norvain Abbey. I wore the habit of a Benedictine monk, but beneath it, Eleanor's ring hung from a cord around my neck, and in my pack, I carried the simple tunic and cloak Boniface had given me, symbols of the choice that lay ahead. The brothers welcomed me with genuine warmth, especially Brother Anselm, who embraced me with tears in his eyes. We feared thou wouldst not return in time for the election of the new abbot, he said. It takes place tomorrow. I am glad to have arrived in time, I replied, though in truth, the abbey's governance no longer seemed as vital a matter as it once had. That evening, after Compline, I visited Cuthbert's grave in the abbey cemetery. A simple stone marked his resting place bearing only his name, his title, and the dates of his birth and death. Nothing to indicate the complexity of the man who lay beneath, his struggles, his secret love, his hidden son. I knelt beside the grave, the spring grass cool beneath my knees, and placed my hand upon the stone. I understand now why thou kept the truth from me, I said softly. Thou sought to protect me, to give me a life untainted by scandal. But in doing so, thou denied me the chance to know who I truly was. The son of Cuthbert and Eleanor, born of love as well as sin. The evening breeze stirred the new leaves on the oak tree that stood sentinel over the cemetery, perhaps the same tree beneath which Cuthbert had first confessed the truth to me. I imagined it carried my words to whatever realm my father's spirit now inhabited. I do not know yet what path I will choose, I continued, but I thank thee for the gift thou gave me at the end. The truth, however difficult it might be to bear. It is a foundation upon which I can build a life of my own choosing, whether within these walls or beyond them. I rose and made the sign of the cross over his grave. Rest in peace, Father. I shall strive to live in a way that honors both thee and the mother I never knew. As I turned to leave, I noticed Brother Adalbert, the eldest of the monks, standing at the edge of the cemetery, his gnarled hands clasping his walking staff. He had been ancient when I was a child, and now he seemed barely tethered to this earth, his skin translucent as parchment, his eyes clouded with cataracts. Thou speaks to the dead, young Thomas, he called, his voice surprisingly strong for one so frail. I pay my respects to our abbot, I replied, approaching him. He nodded, his milky eyes seeming to look through me rather than at me. I knew him when he was younger than thou art now, knew thy mother as well. I stilled, shock running through me like ice water. Thou knew? These old eyes have seen much. My son, Mother Agnes confided in me before she passed to her reward. She thought someone should know, should the truth ever come to light. He reached out a trembling hand and found my arm. They loved each other truly, Thomas. Never doubt that. Their sin was against their vows, not against love itself. Did others know? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. None who still draw breath, save thee. He patted my arm. The brothers would not turn from thee if they knew. Many have come to the cloister by stranger paths than thine, and yet I find myself questioning whether this path is truly mine to walk. Adalbert smiled, revealing teeth worn down to nubs by nearly 9 decades of life. God's call sounds different to each ear that hears it. For some, it leads to the monastery. For others, he gestured vaguely toward the world beyond the abbey walls. I have lived long enough to know that God's work is done in many fields, not only those bounded by stone walls. Thou wouldst not think it a betrayal? Of my vows? Of Cuthbert's memory? Cuthbert broke his vows for love, the old monk said simply. Who am I to say where God's will truly lies? Follow thy heart, Thomas. It led thy father both to sin and to redemption. Perhaps it will lead thee to thy true purpose. The next morning, the brothers gathered in the chapter house to elect their new abbot. To my surprise, several voices nominated, citing my education and the favor Cuthbert had shown me. I declined immediately, explaining that I had matters to resolve before I could consider such responsibility. Brother Anselm was chosen instead, a good man with a steady temperament and a deep love for the community. As the brothers filed out to continue the day's work, I asked the new abbot for a private audience. In Cuthbert's, now Anselm's chamber, I told him everything, holding nothing back. He listened with growing amazement, his eyes widening at the revelation of the crisis of faith had precipitated. So thou art Cuthbert's son, he said when I had finished. I would never have guessed, and yet there is something of him in thy thoroughness, thy attention to detail. I do not know if I can continue as a brother of this order, I said plainly. Not now that I understand how I came to be here. Not when I question whether my vows were truly made with free will and full understanding. Anselm steepled his fingers, considering. What wouldst thou do, if not this? There is a village near Thornfield. I might find work there as a scribe or illuminator for the local lord. Perhaps teach children to read and write. I hesitated before adding, there is also someone there, a woman who has shown me kindness. To my relief, Anselm did not look shocked or disapproving. Thou hast completed thy commission at Thornfield with great skill, I am told. Thy talents would not go to waste in the... Then thou wouldst release me from my vows? He sighed. It is not so simple, Thomas. Formally, such dispensation must come from the bishop, perhaps even Rome itself. But, he paused, choosing his words carefully. There are precedents for those who entered religious life under unusual circumstances. I could write to the bishop, explain the situation without revealing details that might bring scandal. Hope kindled within me. Thou wouldst do this? Cuthbert valued thee above all others in this community, Anselm said. He would want thy happiness, I think. And a monk who serves with a divided heart serves neither God nor his brothers well. He leaned forward. Return to Thornfield. Continue thy work there while I correspond with the bishop. When the matter is resolved, I shall send word. And if the bishop refuses? Anselm's lips quirked in a rare smile. Then perhaps Brother Thomas might be sent on an extended mission to a remote parish, from which he never returned. The church has weathered greater scandals. I left his chamber with a lighter heart than I had entered it. The path ahead was not yet clear, but for the first time, I could see beyond the abbey walls to the possibility of a different life, a life chosen, rather than assigned. That afternoon, I visited the convent side of Norvain one last time, seeking the grave of Sister Agnes, the mother abbess who had shown mercy to Cuthbert and Eleanor. I found it beneath a simple stone similar to Cuthbert's, near a small garden of medicinal herbs. As I knelt to offer a prayer for her soul, a shadow fell across the grave. I looked up to see an elderly nun, her face a maze of wrinkles beneath her wimple. Thou art Brother Thomas, she said, her voice thin but clear. The foundling. I am, I replied, rising to my feet. She studied me with bright, bird-like eyes. I was here the night they found thee at the convent door. I helped bring thee inside, wrapped in linen that was too fine for any peasant's child. My heart quickened. Thou knew Sister Eleanor? The old nun's face softened. I was her friend, one of the few who did not shun her when her condition became... She reached into her sleeve and withdrew a small object, a wooden rosary, its beads smooth with years of use. This was hers. Mother Agnes kept it after Eleanor was sent away, and gave it to me for safekeeping before she died. She said a day might come when it would be needed. I think that day is now. I took the rosary, feeling its worn beads against my palm. Had my mother's fingers moved over these same beads, praying for strength, for forgiveness, for me. She was a good soul, the nun continued, too full of life for these walls. Perhaps, but good nonetheless. Her sin was to love unwisely, not to lack faith. Was she happy here, before? Happy, the nun considered. Not at first. Her family sent her here against her will, as many noble families do with daughters they cannot marry advantageously. But she found purpose in the infirmary, tending the sick, and she had a voice that could make angels weep with envy. When she sang in chapel, the old woman's eyes grew distant with memory. Even Mother Agnes would smile, though she tried to hide it. I clutched the rosary tighter. Thank you, for this, and for speaking of her. Where wilt thou go now? Brother Thomas? She asked, her keen eyes seeing perhaps more than I wished to reveal. I am considering a different path. She nodded, unsurprised. We all have our seasons. The church was thy shelter, when thou needed one. Perhaps now thou art called to plant different seeds. She made the sign of the cross over me. Go with God, child of Eleanor. Live the life she could not. The journey back to Thornfield took 3 days, as before. But this time each step felt like progress rather than retreat. I carried with me Eleanor's letter and ring, the rosary that had been hers, and a formal letter from Abbot Anselm to Brother Boniface, explaining that I was to continue my work at Thornfield, while certain matters were resolved with the bishop. Brother Boniface received me with quiet understanding, arranging for me to have a small cell in the abbey's guest house, rather than the dormitory, a position that acknowledged my uncertain status. There was no more talk of my joining the Thornfield Brotherhood permanently. Instead, I was given commissions to illuminate smaller works, prayer books, psalters, for which I would be paid a modest fee, and in the evenings, when my daily work was done, I would walk down to the village to see Maria. Her father, once he understood my situation, welcomed me cautiously into their home. Thou wert a monk, he said one evening as we sat by the fire, and might be one still depending on thy bishop's whim. I would not have my daughter's heart broken by a man who might be called back to the cloister at any moment. I understand thy concern, I replied. I have been honest with Maria about the uncertainty of my position, but know this, whatever the bishop decides, my heart has already left the cloister behind. If I cannot stay here openly, then I will go elsewhere and make my way in the and I would ask Maria to come with me, if she were willing. He studied me with the shrewd gaze of a man who had raised 2 daughters alone after his wife's death. Thou hast skills that would feed a family? I can write and illuminate better than most. There is always need for such work in towns and nobles' courts, and I am not afraid of physical labor should the need arise. He nodded slowly. Maria could do worse, I suppose. At least thou canst read the Bible to her of an evening. His attempt at humor broke the tension between us. But wait for the bishop's word before thou speaks of marriage. Better to know where thou stands before making such promises. I agreed, though my heart grew more certain with each passing day that my future lay with Maria, in the world outside abbey walls. Spring yielded to summer, and summer began its slow transformation into autumn. I continued my work at Thornfield while deepening my connection to the village. I taught the innkeeper's son to read, helped the baker calculate his accounts, sketched portraits of children for parents who had never seen their offspring's likenesses captured before. With each small service, I felt more a part of the community, not set apart as I had been at Norvon, but woven into the fabric of ordinary. And with each sunset walk back up the hill to Thornfield, I felt less connected to the life I had left behind. Maria and I spoke of the future cautiously at first, then with growing confidence as the weeks passed, with no word from the bishop. We walked the moorland paths, her hand in mine, and planned the life we might build together, a cottage of our own, children with her wheat-colored hair, and perhaps my skill with a quill, a garden where we might grow herbs and vegetables. Thou wilt miss it sometime, she said one evening as we watched the sun sink behind the distant hills. The abbey, the brothers, the certainty of that life. Perhaps, I admit, there is beauty in the ritual, in the chanted prayers, in the community bound by shared purpose. We could still attend Mass. Our children could learn the catechism. Thou needst not abandon thy faith to leave the cloister. I smiled at her understanding. My faith remains, though changed. I believe now that God is present not only within stone walls, but in the world he created, in the sunset we watched together, in the village children's laughter, in the love between two people. She leaned her head against my shoulder. A monk's wisdom with a husband's heart. I could not ask for more. Word from the bishop came, as the first frost silvered the moorland grass. Brother Boniface called me to his chamber one morning and handed me a sealed parchment bearing the bishop's insignia. It arrived with yesterday's messenger. I thought thou wouldst prefer to read it in private. My hands trembled slightly as I broke the seal. The document within was written in formal Latin, full of ecclesiastical language and references to canon law. But its meaning was clear enough. Given the unusual circumstances of my entry into religious life and questions regarding the validity of consent, the bishop granted a dispensation for my monastic vows, releasing me from all obligations to the Benedictine order. I was free. Good news, I trust? Boniface asked, observing my expression. The best, I replied, my voice thick with emotion. The bishop has granted the dispensation. I am released from my vows. Boniface smiled. Genuinely, I am glad for thee. Thomas, thou hast a rare talent that will serve thee well in the world, and if I may say so, a heart too full for the confines of our walls. I shall finish the commission I am working on, I promise. I would not leave thee without a skilled illuminator. Take thy time, and know that thou art welcome to use the scriptoria whenever thy work requires it. The abbey's doors remain open to thee, even if thou choose to dwell beyond them. That evening, I went to Maria with the bishop's letter in hand. Her father tactfully made himself scarce as I explained what it meant. So thou art truly free, she said, her eyes shining. No longer Brother Thomas, but simply Thomas. Thomas, son of Cuthbert and Eleanor, I said, the words still strange upon my tongue. And, if thou wilt have me, husband to Maria. She laughed, a sound of pure joy that seemed to fill the small cottage. Is that thy proposal, former monk? No pretty speech? No bended knee? I grinned, then knelt before her, taking her hand in mine. Maria, daughter of John the wine seller, who taught a cloistered brother to dance beneath the stars, and showed him a life he never knew existed. Wilt thou take this former monk, with all his strange ways and limited knowledge of the world, to be thy husband? To build a life together beyond abbey walls, but still beneath God's sky? I will, she said, pulling me to my feet and into her arms. Though thou must promise to illuminate our marriage certificate most beautifully. That I can promise, I laughed, holding her close. And to teach our children both their letters and the steps of the dance. We were married at Martinmas in the village church. A simple ceremony attended by Maria's father and sister, a few villagers who had become friends, and, to my surprise, Brother Boniface and Brother Anselm, who had traveled from Norvain for Cuthbert would be proud, Anselm told me after the ceremony, not of his sin perhaps, but of the man his son has become. A man who found his own path rather than following one laid by others. And Eleanor? I asked. Would she approve, do you? She would rejoice, said Anselm with certainty. She who sacrificed her life that thou might live? She would count every moment of thy happiness as vindication of that sacrifice. Maria's father gifted us a small cottage at the edge of the village, closer to Thornfield than most. So thou might continue thy work at the abbey, he explained gruffly, though I suspected he also wished to keep his daughter close. And so we began our life together, Thomas and Maria, no longer monk and maid but husband and wife. I divided my time between commissions from the abbey, which paid well but infrequently, and work for the village and nearby nobility, writing letters, creating illuminated family records, teaching the basics of reading and writing to those who could afford such luxury. The cottage gradually transformed under our care. Maria planted an herb garden that rivaled the abbey's in variety if not in size. I built a small scriptorium in the corner by the window, where the light was best for detailed work. In the evenings, we would sit before the fire, she spinning or mending, I sketching or reading aloud from whatever book I had borrowed from Brother Boniface. When Maria told me she was with child, barely 6 months after our wedding, I felt a joy unlike any I had known, and also a strange echo of the past. Would our child know the truth of his or her grandfather, the abbot who had broken his vows? Of the grandmother who had died bringing his father into the world? We will tell them when they are old enough to understand, Maria said, seeing the conflict in my eyes. Not the whole truth at once, perhaps, but enough that they know they come from love, however complicated. Our daughter was born as spring brought new life to the moorland, a healthy, red-faced girl with a dusting of Maria's wheat-colored hair. We named her Eleanor, for the grandmother she would never know but whose sacrifice had made her existence possible. As I held her that first night, her tiny fingers curled around my thumb with surprising strength, I thought of the chain of events that had led to this moment. A forbidden love, a child left at a convent door, a fever that revealed long-buried truth. Had God's hand been in all of it, or merely human choice, with all its capacity for both error and redemption? I may never know the answer to that question, but as I watch Eleanor grow from infant to toddler to child, as Maria's belly swells again with our second child, as our simple life unfolds day by day, I find that the question itself matters less than it once did. For I have found my vocation at last, not in the rigidly prescribed hours of monastic prayer, but in the love of family, in the creation of beauty through my art, in the passing of knowledge to those eager to learn. I illuminate not only sacred texts, but the everyday moments of a life freely chosen. And in this illumination, I believe, I honor both my fathers, the one who raised me in faith, and the one whose blood runs in my vein. I honor Eleanor, whose courage and sacrifice gave me life twice over. And I honor the God who, through paths straight and crooked, led me to this place of belonging. Each night, before sleep claims us, Mariah and I stand at the door of our cottage and gaze up at the stars, the same stars that shine over Norvain Abbey, over Thornfield, over the grave of Abbot Cuthbert and the distant resting place of Sister Eleanor. In that moment, all paths seem to converge, all choices justified, all sins if not forgiven then at least redeemed by what followed after. I am Thomas, no longer the foundling left at the convent door, but a man who has found his place in the world, and in that finding perhaps, lies the greatest illumination of all. If this tale hath touched thy heart, bestow thy favor upon this video, subscribe to the channel, and share thy thoughts in the comments. To hear the next tale, click upon the box to the left.